The reality is like, it was never perfect. Like if you run marketing, you know, there's so many initiatives. One, they don't generate clicks. No one is watching YouTube videos, clicking and converting. Like that's not working. There is a lot of cross-device journeys that happen and have always happened. And click-based attribution does not work there. There's a lot of really valuable strategies that are offline or is a podcast like this that is never going to show on a click-based model.
MMPs after ATT, are they still necessary? Hello and welcome to Growth Masterminds, the podcast for growth marketers. My name is John Koetsier. I'm super pumped for today's chat. We've got somebody who's been a founder. She's an entrepreneur. She's been a head of growth. She's been a data and analytics manager, creator, consultant. She's now running FixMyTracking. And guess what? Lots of people need to fix their tracking. So business must be good. We're going to talk about modern marketing measurement. We're going to talk about all that stuff, what's working, what's not working, whether you should do it yourself, whether you should outsource it or whatever, all that stuff. Super pumped to have this chat. Her name is Barbara Galiza. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you for having me, John. Hi.
As I said, I'm super pumped to have you. You posted to LinkedIn. I saw it. I just thought, I need to have a chat with that woman. That sounds very cool. I want to start here. You've got a crazy, interesting background. You're one of those people who has like 50 things on LinkedIn. Like, it's not 50.
It's a bug and a feature.
Yes, exactly. I think it's more like 16 or something. Like, I'm the same way. Lots of different roles, lots of different places, everything. You've hopped around, entrepreneur. Tell me a little bit about your journey, your story.
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure. I started my career not knowing what I wanted to do. I picked my bachelor's degree journalism precisely because of that, because I had no idea. I just liked learning about things. And I ended up in growth marketing, which seems to be where, you know, people that like to learn things but don't really know what they want to work on end up working in. And I was lucky. I led growth for a few startups. One of them quite successful, went through IC. I was there, you know, doing the growth from the first 2,000 into the first million users. So that was nice, a crash course in startups and data. And after that, I became a freelancer. I did a lot of growth projects. I did like everything. I did a lot of paid media, but I also did positioning, content writing, many, many things. And then, over the last few years, I've been focusing more and more on, the marketing data side, which is always what I would say was my strongest suit. You know, if you're thinking like a T-shaped marketer, data has always been my T. And helping companies with all kinds of marketing data problems, from like attribution to creating growth models to campaign taxonomy to predict LTVs, like everything that's between marketing data I've worked on. And recently, last few months, I've launched a productized service that's called FixMyTracking. And I had this insight recently that all my projects start with me figuring out if the tracking is working. So I thought, let's make this into a product. So that's where I'm at right now.
I love it. I love it. I love it. There's a couple things that come to mind when you say that. One is if you're going to be a consultant, marketing data is a great place to be in because it's always changing. It's always changing. What's available, what you can get, what the platforms are giving you, what the ad networks are giving you, how you use it. All those things are always constantly changing. And so guess what? People need to know, people need to understand those things, people need help. And somebody who's in it full time all the time is super useful. The other thing is, it's funny that you mentioned like your projects always start with what are you tracking? How's it working? All that stuff is because the old thing, like I even forget the name, but it was like I think the guy who invented like scientific management or something like that, right? And he says,
Claude Hopkins.
You can't measure it, you can't improve it, right? Or something along those lines, right? And then of course the big question that comes up is like, just because I can measure it, is that what I pay attention to and that what I approve? And is that the most important thing? So picking what you measure is as important, if not more important, than how you measure it. And if you're able to measure it, there's lots of complexities here, lots of different things that go into.
Yeah, for sure. And what you see a lot too is companies relying on what they can measure and not what they should measure. So that's often
Yes.
something that I help with companies a lot. Like, just because these are the only numbers you could get, it doesn't mean that you should just trust these numbers.
Exactly. I'll bring up her name a couple times in this conversation. I'm sure Hannah Parvaz, who leads Aperture, you probably know
Mm.
her.
Yeah, yeah,
We've
yeah.
chatted about this sort of thing before, and she calls it the North Star, right? And finding your North Star. And that's the metric that directly translates to, are you being successful or not? Are you increasing revenue or not, right? And that's the metric. It may be a manufacturer, it may be a complex metric, it may be a multi-part metric, but it's the thing that is mostly closely tied to, are you actually growing things that matter? And knowing
Yeah.
that, understanding that is really critical. Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to dive into your Substack post because you've got a Substack and it's about measurement. And what's the name of it, by the way?
021 newsletter.
021. What's that name mean?
Well, first of all, I wanted a number, something that's numerical related. And I thought, a lot of marketers struggle to get value from data. And I
Yeah.
help them getting, from 0 to 1 in terms of, and it's also like a little play of words, well, to me at least, because I'm from Brazil and I'm from Rio. And then Rio is the state code of Rio is 0 to 1. So anyone from Brazil will know that means Rio.
Love it.
So
Love it. Multiple layers of meaning there. That's awesome. So check that out if you're interested. Now, you wrote something on last month, July 24th. You still need an MMP in 2025. Attribution alternatives for measuring paid campaigns in a post-ATT world. And you went through a lot of different things there. Maybe give the, 3-minute rundown of what you talked about there.
yeah, so I think, with ATT, Apple's new tracking guideline that, requires users to opt in consent in order to pass, IDFA, which is, what enabled advertisers to join, marketing activity with their first party data. A lot of the basis of how the tracking occurred for mobile measurement broke because it was based on this join key. And it's been very difficult, I think, for advertisers to navigate what the role of MMPs are nowadays. Because, what they've been built upon and what they've been measuring historically doesn't work, the way it does. And also, alongside that, there's been a push towards, data warehouse first measurement with server to server capabilities. So I just wanted to get experts' opinions on MMPs and how they work, and just explain to marketers that are maybe not very happy with what they have set up in terms of mobile measurements, to guide them on to what the other alternatives are. And something that maybe you've seen, but my content tends to be very, very tactical. It's, I like to think that that's a nice differentiator because I do this kind of work all the time. So I always just try to, bring the work that I do, but share
I
it
love it. I love it.
with
It's
others.
useful.
Yeah, so it's just a breakdown, per ad platform, like you're running meta campaigns. Like, what are the different ways that you can measure your app results from your campaigns within Meta that are MMP or not MMP? So that was the gist of the article. So I picked a few ad platforms and then I talked to in depth about how measurement works for them.
Yeah, love it. Absolutely. The interesting thing for me, because you're right, that there was this sort of one key, this IDFA on iOS, GAID, of course, on Android, that
which is still
connected.
available.
Exactly. And probably will continue to be available because have you heard anything about Privacy Sandbox in like the last 6 months?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I kind of think that was something that Google said, okay, we have to do because there's this ATT SK ad network thing on the iOS side. So we have to have a privacy project. But as kind of Apple has kind of not really innovated that much. Nobody's gone to Scan 4, not nobody, but very few. Now Scan 5, AAK is around and nobody's doing that. Google's probably saying, okay, just slow ride that. And I'm not sure that we'll ever get a full implementation of Privacy Sandbox that everybody needs to go with. Anyway, sidebar. But you're right that was the key. the device identifier was the key, everything tracked on. The funny thing for me is I think that was wrong. I think that was wrong. I mean, it was last click, and there's some value in last click, absolutely. But there's also a lot of misdirection in last click, because the funny thing is, right, if you make a decision, whatever decision, you buy something, you install an app, you decide to go for a walk, there's probably 50 different things that build into your decision. And when it's a purchase, or when it's an install of a new app, or becoming a customer somewhere, that's a complex thing. There's probably multiple things that you're not even consciously aware of. Maybe some things that you saw, subconscious came into that, right? And so there's multiple factors. Somebody mentioned something to you, you saw a news story, you read something, you saw an ad, you ignored it, or you thought you did, you saw another ad, and then maybe you tapped, or whatever. There's a long journey there. And this last click, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, this last click can be incredibly misleading, because that got all the credit.
Yeah.
Somebody that I talked to, probably, it's got to be a year ago now, from Moloko, I think, is he likened to a soccer game. I forget his name, is a VP of something at Moloko. He said it's a soccer game. One guy, the striker, scores a goal. But hey, the the goalie saved something. The pass came up from the midfielder, right? There was another pass from all that stuff. And so we had some of that with IDFA, because you could see where there were touches, you could see where there were ad views. So there was some visibility there, but we kind of ignored it mostly, honestly, if we're going to be honest. And even that was only partial. And kind of my thesis right now is that it's conceivable, it's possible that now is better even when it's worse. Because instead of over-relying on one measure, which we always knew was faulty, now we know we need a bigger picture. And so if we look at something, we can say, okay, well, we're going to get data from Meta on what they said that they influenced installs, but also impressions and stuff like that. We're going to actually be in the Meta AMM program, which is now back again, Advanced Mobile Measurement. Maybe it's Google's ICM, different things that are available from different platforms. We're also going to look at scan, because you know what, it's there. So we're going to take a quick look. We're going to look at your first party data. We're going to look at what actually happened after, and for a month after, and 3 months, and 2 days, and all that stuff, all the different, and we're going to look at a bunch of other signals that we have as well. And we're going to assemble a more nuanced picture from that. And I recently did, I called it a mega panel on marketing measurement, because this is a problem, right? And we're coming to a situation where we think that we're coming to some resolution. Hannah Parvas, who I mentioned earlier, called it triangulation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You have a bunch of data that you see. App Store Connect gives you a bunch of data. Your ad platforms give you a bunch of data. None of them actually match. Right? No. Your MMP.
No, they measure different things. Yeah.
Exactly. And so kind of the tactic that we're on at Singular is that triangulation, is that unified measurement, is to pull in, to still reveal all those data sources and what they show. And sometimes, like you say, they show different things. And so you can actually reveal significant challenges with your measurement, but then also take what you can from each and build a nuanced picture and say, hey, this is truthy. Maybe it's not the truth, but it's truthy. Anyway, so that was my thought when I read what you wrote.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot to unpack there, but I like a lot of that take. One of the things, as you said, like I do a lot of content. One of the things that I do is organize this class on attribution that I teach, once a quarter. It's called like the Attribution Masterclass. And a lot of people believe, and I'm taking a bit to web, which is what's most familiar, that, click-based attribution used to really work before privacy changes happened.
Yes.
But, the reality is, like, it was never perfect. Like, if you run marketing, there's so many initiatives. One, they don't generate clicks. No one is watching YouTube videos, clicking and converting. Like, that's not working. There's a lot of cross-device journeys that happen and have always happened, and click-based attribution does not work there. There's a lot of really valuable strategies that are offline or is a podcast like this that is never going to show on a click-based model. Doesn't matter if it's the last click, Markov or first click. Like these strategies are not going to be attributed. And the marketers that understand this, they can use measurements as a competitive advantage because they are able to identify the channels that people can't measure but still perform well. Like paid search, everyone is in paid search. Everyone is bidding for paid search because it's so easy to measure. There is intent, the journey occurs within like the same session. You got this built-in like report per keyword, but what you have, everyone else has. So you're fighting for scraps and you're competing on budget alone. But if you're able to measure things differently, measure the efficiency of a podcast, measure the efficiency of, an out-of-home ad, that's how you can really unlock, competitive growth. And none of this is new because, I was running, like growth for an app in 2014 where, before Cambridge Analytica, where you had on paper all this data, but we were doing a lot of influencer marketing. We were working with these Tumblrs, with these YouTubers, and none of it would ever show in reporting. So we would send a survey to new users. And that's how we would figure out how well those channels were working. Because if we were only using, MMP data, we would only be, putting the money on Meta.
Barbara, you are the third person in probably 5 years of running Growth Masterminds who has mentioned that to me. And each of the others has been a hyper successful, incredibly smart person who has done incredible work in growth marketing. And that is such a 18th century technology, right? Where did you hear about us? Right? It's literally,
and then, like the example you gave, right? Claude Hopkins, like from Scientific Advertising, he's like, one of my favorite marketers. And I always like mention his work because, he was talking about like GeoLift incremental tests in 1917. Like that's like, we talk about how data changes and marketing changes, but at its core, it doesn't change that much either.
The fundamentals don't change. The tactics have to change. The data that's available and how you get it changes. And that's changing all the time as well. So that makes a ton of sense. Absolutely. Super interesting conversation. The other challenge, I was going to mention the other challenge, because you're talking about some of the challenges of unmeasurable channels, is that, as I heard recently, TikTok, obviously hugely popular. Click-through is not a good measure of TikTok or other visual media. Apparently, for young people, millennials, maybe even some Gen X, they watch, then they go search. They watch, then they go search. So you have to be looking at incrementality. You have to be looking at incrementality of the efforts you're doing, because you're never going to catch a direct digital link between those things.
Yeah. And I always try to really make a distinction when it comes to data to clients. You have data for reporting and you have data for campaign optimization. So something like incrementality is going to help you make better decisions. That's data for reporting. You're going to be able to understand, okay, whatever I'm using to measure TikTok, be that the SDK, the MMP, or a CAPI, like that can help with reporting. But most importantly, what you also need to have is for the ad platform to be able to attribute conversions so they're able to target the right people. So whenever you're thinking, and that's what I've been focusing with FixMyTracking. I've been focusing on, not attribution, not this one source of truth utopia, not building like rule-based MTA. Like these things are all valuable. Incrementality is valuable. MMM is valuable. Rule-based MTA is valuable. But reporting alone won't get your campaigns to perform well. Nowadays, in the age of AI, in the age of like algorithms, you also need to have a conversion event that is attributing well.
Yeah. One is what to do. The other is improving what you're doing, right? And both are absolutely critical. And the improving what you're doing, that has to be a quick turnaround. That has to be tightly connected, right? Otherwise, you can't optimize in real time. So you got your CAPIs, you got your web-based SDKs and other things like that. Absolutely. And your cross-platform tracking.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. So I guess maybe where we might differ is in should you build it or should you buy it? And I guess that's the question, right? And it depends a little bit on how complex your marketing is, how many platforms you're dealing with, I guess, and also how much time you want to spend on things that are not core to building your product, building your business.
Yeah, for sure. I think like the difficult. I think like MMPs and SDKs. That's like very complex attribution. Like I was just talking to a friend now. If I'm looking where FixMyTracking is heading, like I'm getting so many leads that are struggling with the MMPs that they're using. So I find that even though people are buying a solution, in a lot of cases that solution is still not solving their problem. Also because like scan, right? Like who understands scan? Like marketers don't understand scan. I understand, that all these different tools are trying to allocate direct organic to a source, and they're using these like different sources of data they have available, and they're trying to predict, based on fingerprinting, based on timestamp, where does it go to? But this is so confusing for marketers because they don't trust the data. So it's such a difficult time now where I always tell clients, and that is, perhaps also like where we differ. I would rather have like less accurate attribution that I understand than a better attribution that I do not. So in most cases, I tend to say like pick something that you're able to audit, because like you're saying, it's going to be truth-ish in the end. So
you ultimately know what you have yourself in your own app, in your own business that comes in revenue. That's what you know.
Yeah.
Everything else, there's some degree of uncertainty, and your job is to minimize that. Absolutely. Okay, cool. So
I just to say to that, I have this sentence that I always say, which is all marketing metrics are estimates.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Wow. What is that saying about statistics? Statistics are for losers.
Lies them lies and statistics. All models are wrong, but some are useful. There's a lot of variations of those.
Exactly. Cool. Well, this has been a super interesting conversation. I mean, there's so much more that we could go into, and there's so much more that's changing all the time, right? I mean, we just see, like I mentioned, AMM comes back. Nobody saw that coming. I didn't have that on my bingo card for 2025, right? AMM was canceled because Meta was like, okay, Apple's all privacy now, and we got to be more careful. Now, there's structure around it, right? You have to sign up. You only get that data via an MMP. But you also have other things from Google. You get ICM coming, so you have more touches, more visibility, a little bit more granularity, which is all good stuff. And of course, many people are using multiple methods to understand everything. So it's a confusing world, especially if you're just jumping into it. And I really do feel for people. One of the things that's super interesting that Singular has built, and it's not fully available right now, but it's called Copilot. And it just walks you through. You're setting something up. How do you do it? How do you set up a web tap flow, and just walks you through? Here you go. Here's what data you need. Here's how to put it in. And that's because there are difficulties. There are challenges. That's why you have a job, right? That's why you have customers. And so we got to make it a bit easier if we can. It's not quite the big red easy button yet, but hopefully it's getting close.
Yeah, but will it ever, like I stand by to what I said, though when something becomes too easy to measure, it will become too competitive. And then the marketers that will survive or will do their best job will be the ones that will be figuring out the difficult to measure channels. That will always be the case.
Exactly, exactly. And everything is going to keep changing as well. There will be new laws, there will be new
Yeah.
platforms with new measurement policies and other things like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
this is a
And
growth
new
industry.
business strategies too, like, yeah, I think my opinion is that ATT only exists so Apple search ads can run. So
Maybe I'm not certain on that. That's interesting. The other thing that comes to mind, I just did our quarterly trends report. CTV is massively up and growing, and we see huge growth potential there, right? And that's a whole different beast, whole different animal. And there's some measurability there, and there's some challenges there as well. And there's lots of different methods. Anyways, we got to call it. There's so much more we could chat about. Maybe we have to have another chat sometime. I really do appreciate this time, and thank you for taking. I know it's late for you.
no, it's not that late. It's perfect time. Thank you so
Awesome.
much, John.
Awesome. Thank you.